Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Followers. Today we decided to bring in a guest, and our first guest is no better man than John Diony O'Connor from Dingle. So we're going to just have a chat about some of his experience to date, some of the research that he's carried out himself, and some of his, I suppose, thoughts and maybe views on the industry that we're all in. So yeah, without further ado, we're back here with John, Shane, and as I said, Diney as well. So just for confusion, we might keep you to your more commonly known name of Diney throughout the talk.
You've called me far worse in your time anyway, so you can call me whatever you want.
Yeah, I genuinely saw John O'Connor pop up on the Zoom, and I was like, "Who in the name of God is John O'Connor?" He popped up. I was like, "Oh right, of course, it's Diony."
Yeah, it's an honour, a privilege to be your first guest. It's something I can always say. So when you make it big, that can be my little claim to fame.
That's it. That's it. It's only a matter of time. I know it.
It's going to explode after this week.
Well, you were the key, man. You were the key, the one we were waiting for. Um, so I guess maybe if to give maybe to start us off, if you want to give us a rundown on just your experience. I suppose we all know each other from our masters, but maybe just a bit of a background on yourself and what's brought you to where you are now.
Yeah, I suppose I always knew I wanted to get into something in the area of sport. I knew that I wanted to do sports science in UL. I knew that from very early stages. Really, I skipped transition year. I kind of knew straight. I knew what I wanted to do, and so yeah, I went away and I did sports science in UL, and really enjoyed it, and really enjoyed lots of aspects of it. So I kind of knew when I was going into it as well that I would have to do a masters, So I kind of took a bit of time out after I graduated from my undergraduate, and kind of decided what area would I go into: nutrition, strength and conditioning, because it all kind of interested me really. And even sports psychology was one that really interested me too. But anyway, nutrition was the one that I landed on. So yeah, that's when I kind of started looking into courses and came across the one that we did. I loved the idea of it being part time, so you can kind of work away while you're working through the coursework and stuff. To kind of make the books balance as well while you're studying, I suppose. So that kind of suited me at the time. And yeah, I had the 2 years. A lot of people are kind of under pressure or eager to get it done in 1 year. I kind of had 2 years. That part of it didn't bother me. So yeah, that's how I got into that. And no regrets so far. Really enjoyed. That's kind of what led me to here, I suppose. Then once I graduated with my masters, then I decided to. I was lucky enough. I kind of got a year in with the Kerry Hurlers to get some kind of hands-on experience, and it was Kevin Beasley who set me up with that. He was the nutritionist with the footballers at the time, and who's been a great help to me really, since I kind of started into this game. So it was great to get some hands-on experience there. Steep learning curve in with them fellas, but good crack. Really, really enjoyed that now. I was very inexperienced really at the time, but I suppose kind of learn off fellas too. John Barry was the strength and conditioning coach there, and he was very good. I got on well with him. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. And then after 2018, I decided to head over to Australia with myself and my girlfriend headed over. My brother is obviously over there. So I decided to head over there. Unfortunately, found it difficult, alright, to get a bit of work in the line of nutrition out there, because only had a 1 year working visa, and when anyone sees you've only a 1 year visa, they kind of brush you off. But luckily, alright, I have Mark is with Geelong out there, so I managed to get some experience out there. Got a look at see how they do things out there, which was a really really cool experience. And just kind of kept myself topped up with some CPD or CPD stuff while I was over there as well. Just to kind of keep my mind, I suppose, a little bit sharp while I was over there. So yeah, then I came home just before Christmas and had just started Target Nutrition, and the lockdown happened. So that was a tricky enough. It was kind of an awkward time to set up, but thankfully, now that things have lifted, it's kind of taken off a little bit. So kept busy now with that. So really enjoying that. I'm down at West Kerry Fitness back here in Dingle. So yeah, that's where I am now.
Just bring it back to your undergrad in sports science, Diony. You said you did your masters in, or sorry, not your masters, your thesis in sports psychology. Was that something you were particularly interested in and wanted to pursue, and decided to go the nutrition route because you felt you were more interested in that, or what kind of led you down, for, or dipping into one and then going a different route?
Yeah, originally I kind of had decided to go down the sports psychology route, and funnily enough, I was actually kind of pushed off the idea by somebody who was involved in sports psychology. So their thought process was that most of the work in sports psychology at the time, and I'm sure probably still is realistically, was in research and was in an academic setting, and that wasn't really something that interested me at the time. Work was really hard to come by in in sports psychology. So I suppose I was just kind of thinking a little bit practically too, maybe. So I decided, yeah, it was still, even when I left college, it was still in my mind. But when I took the year out to kind of think things over a little bit, I thought I might stay a bit safe. Like nutrition is still something obviously that really interests me, so I thought I'd go down that road instead. I thought it'd be kind of broader area. You can kind of, it touches off more areas. You kind of more work opportunities and so on and so forth. So that's kind of why I steered a little bit away from the sports psychology.
Yeah, I suppose in practical terms as well, a team can cope without a psychologist, whereas every player or athlete or even general person has to eat. So you can
Yeah,
always try and
absolutely.
make little improvements there. So even regardless of interest, if it's just looking at general job prospects, everyone has to eat. Not everyone needs to work with a psychologist. Well, an awful lot of people probably could, but
Yeah,
even
yeah.
for like just general
No,
life. But
absolutely, I agree with you. Yeah, 100%. And you can kind of obviously it translates a little bit more over into the non-athletic population as well. I think so. You're kind of yeah, you wouldn't be too stuck with the nutrition.
I suppose actually, with having done that, have you found yourself carrying any of that research that you did in your undergrad in that line? Have you found it to be quite useful in your line of work at the moment, or with even with any of the teams that you've been around, say even like the Dingle lads or the Kerry hurlers, who, as you mentioned, like were I remember chatting to you back when you were with them. They were good fun, to put it one way. Yeah, did you find that any, any of that stuff would have been beneficial to have had behind you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was actually interesting enough research. So what I did was I compared the imagery abilities of elite and non-elite athletes. So the population I had, I basically in UL, I used the PE and sports science department to do my questionnaires, and there was a lot of intercounty players, kind of elite level hockey players, hurlers, and things like that. So I divided them into elite and non-elite categories, and the elite scored far higher at mental imagery, so they were far better at mental imagery, I suppose, than their non-elite counterparts. And then I also compared the imagery abilities of men and women. So gave them a series of questionnaires, and funnily, like that, women and men both scored higher at various different questionnaires. So men were much better at the spatial awareness. So you're given basically a questionnaire with a 3D shape and then three option answers. With it rotated, and men scored far better at that one, which did come in line with previous research. And then women scored higher in the reasoning and stuff. So it kind of did I suppose back up previous research, but it was interesting at the time, and it's something that I enjoyed doing, and it's definitely something that stuck with me alright as I kind of went forward.
That's cool. That does sound like very interesting stuff, and I suppose look, it is interesting too to see that your findings did uh, rowing with previous research. And I suppose with that in mind, the imaging and that, do you find that that's a great way to approach things from a nutrition perspective with different clients as well, or does that ever come into it at all?
It wouldn't tie in a whole pile, Damo, to be honest. Imagery isn't something that I would really, I suppose it's something you could, but it's not, to be totally honest, it's not something that I have done to this point. It wouldn't tie in directly, I suppose, as such, you know.
So what was it like? I suppose with your masters, your masters research, you had the Kerry hurlers on board for the Tartary research. What was that like? What was it like running it with a group like the lads there? And how did you find working with that type of research then?
I'll be honest, it was really, really hard research. It was, if I was doing it back over again, it was probably too much for one person, for loads of reasons, I suppose. I got very excited. So I got the research idea first from Dr. Dominique Kondo, who's the Geelong nutritionist, and she kind of mentioned tart cherry juice as this kind of emerging supplement and research area, and that very little research had been done on its impact. So a lot of research had been done. When I say a lot, quite a bit of research had been done on the effects of tart cherry on the sleep indices of people with insomnia, and it showed some really positive results. And she said that no study to date had investigated its effects within an athletic population. So I got very excited and I said, "Oh my God, I'm going to do one of the first ever research projects on tart cherry juice within an athletic population." All sounded great in my head, but it was just a huge, huge workload. For loads of reasons, I suppose. Sleep, first of all, is very, very difficult to quantify with even the best technology. You know what I mean? It's really, really hard to quantify, even with the watches and all those things. Um, so, and also, it's really hard to control the food intake that affects sleep. So obviously, as you all are, I'm sure, very well aware, there's quite an alcohol culture within the GA. So there was a few nights of beer thrown into the study that I had to withdraw. Um, Obviously, caffeine impacts sleep. High GI meals close to bed impact sleep. So these are all things that are really, really hard to control. You're kind of taking guys' words for it that they're taking the supplement. You know, it was really hard to find a control that tasted like the cherry juice, so that the guys would know which one they were taking. Um, so yeah, it was a lot of work. Would I have done a different research project looking back? I probably would have, to be honest. Yeah. So, but it was interesting. Look, the findings were interesting. Anecdotally speaking, a lot of the guys liked it. They found that it worked well. Whether that was the placebo effect or what, I'm not sure, but I did hear some good reports back. A lot of guys didn't like it. They didn't like the sour taste. They didn't like taking in fluid, I suppose, so close to bed as well, which is another, if that affects you, if you need to go to the toilet in the middle of the night, then it might be worth your while taking it to improve sleep. So yeah, look, it was interesting. It was an interesting area. It kind of, yeah, it did improve. Like the probability, like, it's one of those things, like, in, if it has uses, I suppose, like every single thing you say in sports nutrition, like, it depends, I suppose. Depends on who, it depends on for what. But yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting project.
And speaking of the group you were working with, the Kerry hurlers at the time, like from being on the opposite sideline to you at a game one day, you can tell there's just a massive buzz and energy off the whole group, whether that comes from the management team and filters down, or from the players themselves, or whatever. Did you just, regardless of the nutrition experience, did you just enjoy being in as part of a group like that?
Absolutely. After that year, I suppose I said, this is for me, like, um, I suppose, sports nutrition within a team environment. I said, this is definitely for me. crack was very, very good. But I suppose because there's so few clubs, it's literally only a handful of clubs in North Kerry that make up Kerry hurling. So I suppose it's a real tight knit group. Fintan O'Connor, the manager, was great, and he really, I suppose, embraced that and used it, I suppose, to kind of fuel the team. Real underdog mentality and stuff. So yeah, no, it was something I really enjoyed and got on great with the lads. It was great crack and a big learning process, I suppose, for me as well at the time.
And did you learn a bit about hurling while you were in there?
I always knew that. I was always wristy. Always wristy.
And when you went in there first, like you probably went in with the nutrition mindset first, did you realise fairly quickly that this is actually way more working with people and working on not so much psychology, but just on their behaviour and their habits? And how did you find like adjusting to that?
Very good, I suppose. Like nutrition, I suppose, comes down to coaching. So coaching is something, whether it be nutritionists or S&C or management or selectors, you see like various different coaching styles, I suppose, within a group like that. You have a manager, you have 3 selectors, you have a strength and conditioning coach, physios, and I suppose it's interesting to see how all those people manage people and manage different personalities and stuff. So I suppose you definitely learn a lot from that, even whether you realise it or not. I suppose you're like a sponge in that environment. Especially for me, it was my first year out of college, and I suppose I was nervous. I didn't really know any of the lads. I didn't know what they'd make of me. Do you know what I mean? I suppose it was at the start. It's kind of just about, I suppose, building that trust and relationships and stuff like that. And as I say, something that I suppose will stand to me going forward, and something that I really enjoyed.
How did you find fitting in as part of an overall kind of backroom team, like dovetailing with the S&C coach? Maybe sometimes trying to sell an idea to the manager before you can even make sure it lands with the players or whatever.
Yeah, I suppose the thing that struck me, I suppose, at the start is, I suppose, trying not, like, being conscious of not being too vocal or saying too much, because there's a strength and conditioning coach, there's a manager, there's a physio, they all have things to say, I suppose. So you only play a certain role, I suppose, in the backroom team. You don't want to be bombarding lads with information. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to be pinging messages into the WhatsApp group there every half an hour. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose it's knowing when to give the info, knowing what info to give. I suppose condensing it as much as you can. Because a lot of these guys weren't interested in science. Do you know what I mean? They just wanted to know what and how and when, if even that. So I suppose kind of breaking it down, I suppose, making it, I suppose, translatable, basic, no messing, no fancy stuff, no frills, and just tell them what they needed, why they needed it, and when they needed it. And simple as that, really.
I do find that that's a very common thing amongst athletes. Is that it they don't necessarily want. Well, you do obviously come across some that want to know everything and anything about what's going on, but for majority, it's just like, if you can just lay it out for me there, so that, and will this make me a better athlete? Will this make me play better, train better, perform better, recover better? I don't particularly care why. It's just, and I suppose I kind of wonder then, in comparison to, say, I suppose that when I say that from an athlete perspective, from my experience working with athletes, but from your experience of being inside with the inside to see the inside of an AFL setup, is it similar to that? Is it? Do you still have a mix of players who are just like, I don't particularly care why this is working or what the reason for it is, but just what should I be doing, and that's it? Or is it a little bit different in a professional setting like that?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, they're still humans. Do you know what I mean? They might be getting paid for what they're doing, but they're still just human beings. There's guys who mightn't necessarily be remotely interested in nutrition. Like anything, I don't think you'll get. You're not going to get a panel of 30 players where everyone's interested in their nutrition. Do you know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. Obviously, a bit more likely in an elite environment where guys probably have had to do a little bit more to get to where they are, and nutrition, I'm sure, is something that ties into that. But no, I mean, I'm sure there's definitely guys playing elite sport, and Geelong know differently that yeah, they kind of, I suppose, I suppose they just do the basics maybe, and don't necessarily want or aren't that interested, I suppose, in doing any extra.
Murphy, you the question there, do you?
No, I was just going to say, because I know Shane is tight for time, if he wants to hop in with any questions here now.
I was interested in covering that in on the Australia topic, because I know you probably saw when you were working or when you were living over in Australia, even at like the most basic level. So I was working a lot training with like general population and like amateur sports, but like I found the baseline was still so much higher than say here. Like everyone was so much more clued in about their nutrition. Everyone was up at like 5:30 in the morning to go training before they went to work, and it was just like you're starting at such a higher level. Did that bar continue through, or was there just like a smaller gap between, say, in Australia there's a smaller gap between general population and professional athlete than say here, where general population doesn't know so much, but then obviously athletes a huge difference. Did you see that when you were over there?
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I mean, Australia in general, there's a really big fitness culture. I mean, they've all their outdoor gyms and stuff like that, and as you say, they're up at the crack of dawn, and if a guy's in an office till 5 or 6 in the evening, he's making sure he's getting his session in the morning, and like there isn't too many people who are into fitness who aren't into nutrition. I think they really go hand in hand. So yeah, I think that's a very, very fair point.
Even
Definitely a smaller gap
the kind of
between.
like the smaller things, like they're even so clued in about sleep. Like there was people I met in Australia who knew they were training, so they'd be in bed by 8 o'clock, and you'd just be like we went over as a group of Irish people, and they were like, never heard of someone going to bed at 8 o'clock, after they were like 6 years old. It's just such a different culture. Like the general population are only preparing like an athlete over here would, and I was just curious. It's like, geez, the athletes must be absolutely next level to kind of click in through. But I suppose if you're
Yeah,
brought up on that,
absolutely.
it's just you just really get the proper
Even
athletes then
their
if everyone's in that condition.
Yeah, even their cafe culture over there. I mean, if you were to go out for breakfast here, there's full Irishes and everything on the menu.
Yeah,
Whereas over there, it's avocado, poached eggs. Do you know what I mean? It's
yeah, the
it's
whole nine.
the the acai bowls and all those things. So yeah, they're really, I suppose they're ahead of us. I think
Yeah,
in
definitely.
overall in terms of their nutrition and I suppose the whole fitness culture over there.
Yeah, so even from like an information point of view, it was so much easier because I was kind of looking in. I was still doing bits and pieces study wise when I was over there, but it's so easy to get like details on the AFL player. Like obviously it'll be not named players, but all the stats, all the information that they collect is pretty much available to you if you're studying in a university or you happen to stumble upon university logins. Like it's really easy to get that information, which is great. Like they want to stop laughing, Murph. It happens. You stumble upon logins. It's not illegal. And yeah, it's just like they want to push forward and they want that next generation to be able to improve them as athletes, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Yeah, they're cutting edge. There's no doubt about it.
Now, is that a cultural thing? Do you think? Like, is this like I'll say enough? We're not going to go into that in too much detail, but like that would. I mean, where does that cultural difference come from? Do you think that health and fitness is so paramount when we see across, I suppose, the rest of the world that there's struggles with different with the area of nutrition, that people would rather get caught up in the nuances of different diet types than just focus on having a decent diet overall. If it's such a common thing in Australia for people to be kind of thinking about their sleep time, exercising early in the morning, restaurants that the cafes that the food offerings are kind of better quality, better or healthier, I suppose. In some aspects, I suppose from the two of you who've lived over there, what have you kind of seen from the Australian culture that really kind of separates it in that regard? Or have you noticed anything? Is it just it is what it is?
I'd say the weather kind of plays a big difference in it because I think like any Australian you meet, they want to do something outside, be it like even if they were having like a session, even as much as that, it's always going to be a barbecue or it's going to be something outside. So I think they eat well and they train well because they want to be able to go on big hikes. They want to be able to enjoy. They have this beautiful country that's kind of sunny 24/7 all the time, so they just want to be out and enjoy it. And I think that just feeds through, and they want to feel themselves to be able to go on those bigger hikes or kind of things like that. They just enjoy a healthier lifestyle, and I guess over time, like that's a generational thing that's kicked through. Whereas we're in a big change at the moment, where our kind of generation is a big difference from the generation before us, like health and sports wise. So I think they just clicked into that a lot earlier. I don't know if you agree with that, Tanya, but that's
And
what
I
I
think
kind of
just as
saw.
well, I think Australia as a country, it's pretty much brand new. You know, they don't have any of the deep rooted beliefs and cultural habits and stuff that we would have over here, I suppose. So they're kind of in their infancy, I suppose, as a country. So yeah, I think that the newest trends are kind of what's happening there. So they're starting at a later point, I suppose, than we are. Like, so they don't have, as I say, any of those kind of deep rooted eating habits or even cultural beliefs or habits that we would have here.
Was that Shane gone, this? Or see still
Not
there?
even a goodbye.
He didn't agree with your point at all. He just stormed off. Just on like comparing the two different teams and the two different setups between Kerry hurlers and Geelong AFL players, were there any bits you saw in Geelong that like, oh yeah, I can see that making a massive difference? I definitely, like, if I was back with Kerry again or with whoever again, I'd definitely bring that in. Then there's other bits you're like, do you know, that'd be brilliant to have, but like that's so far down my list of priorities.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's difficult. There's definitely certain things. I mean, I suppose info posters. So Geelong had this thing over there in their stadium when they came in, the hydration station. Load of infographics, loads of info sheets. It's something the guys pass all the time. So I suppose you're bound to look at it at some stage. You know what I mean? So that's something I definitely picked up. It's easy, posters on the wall, lots of good info. And then some of it is just completely so far. I mean, you have to be realistic too, I suppose. They're a professional club with heavy backing and stuff. So I suppose not a lot of it is directly translatable, but you can do your own. I suppose you can kind of do your own take or do as close as you can get. I'm trying to think now what kind of ideas I picked up. That was definitely one. So the hydration station and all your various recovery shakes, your whey for guys that mightn't have played that many minutes, your full recovery, your carbohydrate recoveries, drinks and stuff like that for guys who might have played a full game. The weighing scales on the way in and the way out if you want to measure your fluid loss. Things like that are all things that are doable, I suppose, back here as well, and they don't necessarily require huge funding. But then again, like on the other side of it, there's lots of things that do. They have the sleep rings and do you know what I mean, that measure all that, and they get all them for free. So they're things that obviously, if you were to ask Tim Murphy and the county board for that, I'd say you'd be told where to go. So I suppose it's just being realistic. I suppose prioritizing what you think is most needed. And yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing, is to be realistic and practical.
To your point about the water station hydration station, having those infographics there, and that, I suppose, when you look at the GAA setting, then back here, when you compare, if we were to compare one with the other, but the GAA setting for us especially is I suppose we're looking at the I suppose the WhatsApp group as being our station where we're actually posting up those bits, and then like you mentioned, you don't want to be kind of constantly barraging people with information, and it's one of the things that, like, right, that having that station like you mentioned, Geelong, is fantastic because guys are just going to walk past it every day, so at some point, they're going to actually look at it, especially if it's kind of brought to their attention and that. But like when you could pull back into our setting there, where we're dealing with a WhatsApp group, and we're just like, we're coming up to training. The last thing you want to do is there on a Tuesday and a Thursday and again on a Saturday to go fluid guidance, recovery after training. So you're left posting something into a group, and then kind of going after everyone individually to see how they're getting on, or when they come to you to actually speak about something, whether it's they've come to you by their own accord or whether they've been instructed to come to you. You're like, oh, that's yeah. Well, did you take a look at the fluid guidance? If we stick with that, and they look at you like you've 10 heads, like, oh, is that there? Because there's just so much information coming through those, I suppose, chat groups that it can be almost like a bit like white noise. You're just adding to it a little bit. So yeah, I really like that idea, and I suppose it is obviously a little bit more difficult here, even if there's the centre of excellence kind of areas being used in different counties, that because they're being used by loads of different teams constantly, it's almost like we're getting closer to where we're in a position to offer those things. But yeah, it's certainly something that I think that's a fantastic idea, just to have those, the same station just there on the way to the dressing room, whatever it is, the guys are able to hit up. That's a really cool idea. But it's like you said, they're a professional team, they're a professional entity. They have the ability to put this forward. Whereas with all three of us here, in our experience, like trying to get that information across is very tough. When you can say it once, but like if you start saying it week in, week out, you're sooner to get chopped from the WhatsApp group than than anything else. But yeah, it's interesting to see that, and I suppose, was there any other kind of standouts from your time inside there, or I suppose you're in the unique position as well, where your brother Mark plays for them, and so, like, is there anything that about the coaching that he receives over that you're like, geez, this is really interesting stuff, or is it very much still along the lines of how we would kind of practice ourselves, just he has it available to him on the daily?
Yeah, I think that's probably the thing. I mean, there is only at the end of the day there is only so much you can do, especially in a squad of 40 players. There's only so much you can give for guys individually too. I mean, the Geelong nutritionist, Dr. Dominique Kondo. I mean, I'd probably add another 20 minutes to your podcast if I was to list off all the things she's stuck in. She's head and director of nutrition at Deakin University. She's involved with Sports Dietitians Australia. So I mean, she only has a certain amount of time too, she's actually only in at the club on certain days, so you have to tap her, you have to hit her up when she's there. Obviously contactable at all times or whatever, but you know what I mean, face to face. She's only available for at certain stages and certain slots. So I mean, it's again, they can do a bit more, but there's only so much more they can do at the end of the day. Like, I mean, the biggest benefit they have, I suppose, is funding. So yeah, I suppose to answer your question, like, do they do things more differently? Not really. I mean, all the principles are still the same, and stuff like that. So similar, I suppose, just more advanced.
That's interesting. That's cool.
So since you've come home, then you've set up Target Nutrition. You're pucking out all the recipes on Instagram. You're working in West Kerry Fitness a bit with a few clients and everything. Just like to give people a few general ideas, and you can plug Target all you like there. We'll let Shane plug APEC. You're at home there.
Somebody say APEC.
You have about 20 minutes to make a dinner. What are the standard things in the O'Connor fridge? And you're like, oh, I'll just throw together a quick dinner. What are 2 or 3 options that would be your kind of big favourites there?
Eggs are my go-to. Such a low cooking time. So many varieties you can have. They're my main go-to. I try and eat porridge breakfast these days just to free up eggs as a meal for later on in the day. Like when I have eggs for breakfast and I'm looking for something for lunch or dinner, then again I'm like, gosh, I've eaten my eggs. So yeah, eggs are really, really my go-to. They're so quick. They're unbelievably nutritious, packed with protein. So yeah, they're my go-to really. A lot of my recipes involve eggs, to be honest. So they're they're
Can we
definitely
get
something I
this
recommend having.
sponsored by somebody, some eggs, this podcast?
Maybe after
We
this.
drop in a
Yeah.
brand name there or anything.
Love nothing more.
Yeah. Local. Yeah. Manning's eggs are the ones I use here locally. So
There we go.
if they're
We got a
listening.
name drop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant, man. Like like you've recipes constantly going out. Do you, are you just, are you planning recipes ahead, or are you just kind of going, this is what I eat, so you're putting it up as you're going? And how have you found the kind of the takeoff into Instagram in itself? Do you find that it's something that takes up quite a bit of your time, or is it kind of something it just slips nicely into your day with putting out stuff?
For the most part, it really is how I eat. I love. I'm a massive foodie. Like love food. So I'd always kind of tend to push the boat out and try new things. But I suppose it's always deep rooted in healthy, easy, nutritious. I mean, what I'm looking for when I put up a recipe on Instagram, is easy. As not. I don't want an ingredient list. Do you know what I mean? That you need to go to a special supermarket to get some of the stuff. So easily, readily available, I suppose, ingredients. Quick. Nobody wants to be spending hours inside in the kitchen. Everyone wants something that's quick, easy, high protein, and they're kind of the main things that I try to hit. It's I don't enjoy. I won't lie. I don't enjoy the Instagram side of things, but that's just the way things have gone. I suppose it's the platform that you have to deal with people on now. It's just the way it is. I think I don't want to sound
Nature of the beast.
like an old man, but it's just the way it is. So I see you're doing a bit of it yourselves. They're fairly impressive. You've showed me up. I'm gonna have to up the game. I'm gonna have to up the game again.
We went down the easier route of making a podcast rather than putting out content. But I agree with you, man. I'd be the same with you when it comes to Instagram. Like for me, it's something I have to really mentally build myself up to. Whereas if I was to maybe it's just telling my age a little bit, but um, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like I eat every day. I eat well every day, and yet I still can't seem to kind of you know get a little bit of a flow going with posting in on things. It's almost like I overthink things too much a little bit, but I do find that in the area of nutrition, that when you write something and put it out there, that it seems to be the stick that people will hold on to beat you with going forward. You mentioned one thing, like even like I suppose in the world we live in, we might be like carbohydrates are fantastic for insert anything, and all of a sudden you have these messages coming in, and it's like, well, we don't need carbohydrate. Like,
Yeah.
Jesus, I just put out a recipe for sweet potato muffins. Like, what
That's the problem, I suppose, as well. I think with Instagram, you're competing with a lot of bluffers and a lot of what should they call themselves, influencers and fucking bloggers and what have you, I suppose. And everybody's listening to what they're going to do just because they've X amount of followers or whatever. But yeah, I suppose it's a dangerous enough platform in one way if you think of it that way. Like there's some really, really, even though it depends on yourself. I mean, the likes of yourselves, there's some really good evidence-based practitioners out there now, the likes of yourselves included. So it's up to you, really. I suppose it's about having the cop on of who to follow and who to buy into, as opposed to and know who to avoid and who I suppose isn't qualified or isn't exactly putting out some truthful stuff.
I actually found that it to be even in like high performance sports nutrition, that almost on a weekly basis I could come across somebody coming to me going like, "Oh, I'm thinking of doing this," and it could be genuinely a massive like change their diet. Like I had a rugby player once who decided midweek that he was going to go ketogenic. In and it was roughly, it was around March. So we're in the business end of the rugby season, and he decided midweek that he was going to go ketogenic, but he didn't speak to me until the following week. And he had a dire game on the weekend, and I was just kind of asking him. I was like, "Oh, you kind of, how did you feel at the weekend?" And he was like, "Oh, I just didn't really have any energy, but basically, I haven't really adapted into ketosis yet." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Oh, I've decided I'm going to go ketogenic because it's going to improve my sporting performance." And I was like, "Whoa." I was talking to you on Tuesday and you mentioned nothing. And the very next day, he decided to completely change his diet. So he'd absolutely no carbohydrate going into him, kept training away like normal, and went out to play a game at the weekend and fell flat in his face with no energy. Um, and that's just one example, but
Probably the best thing that could have happened to him, to be honest.
probably was, yeah. But it's something that in both rugby and Gaelic football that I've come across, that where like Instagram and social media in general, but Instagram seems to be a big one where it's just the the level of information that's constantly going out is through the roof, but the actual evidence base around it, or the practical guidelines around different diet strategies and different diet types, don't tend to be there. A lot of it is pretty much opinion based, and because of like followings and all that, um, behind whoever is making a claim, that it tends to be that that's almost proof in itself. Like, oh, they have X amount of followers, they have to know what they're on about, and I'll just go blindly down that line. But I'm just wondering, like, I've experienced that. I'm just wondering, have you had much experience with that? Or anything with, whether it's clients coming to you with Target, or when you were with the Kerry Hurlers or anything like that, where you kind of felt like you were battling against kind of information that's just loosely being banded around online.
Yeah, some are far easier. Some are far, I suppose, easier to dismiss than others. I mean, I don't know if you saw. I don't know if you saw there that Quade Cooper's come out recently and said he's carnivore now, and he's felt the best that he's ever felt. He's drinking bone broth and he's eating steak, not only meat. Said he's in the shape of his life. He's hitting PBs in the gym, um, and loves it. So I mean, that's more difficult to argue with somebody who approaches you than would be skinny teas or apple cider vinegar or something like that. One of the other common ones, because he shows up a photo of Quade Cooper and an actual quote from Quade Cooper saying, "I feel greater than I've ever felt before." So that you're kind of like, yeah, he might, but at the same time, the science doesn't back it. I mean, if it's I suppose, and we're all individual, I suppose, like the answer, I suppose, to nearly every question in nutrition and sports nutrition, and I think it annoys people, is it depends. Like, it really does. Is this good or bad? It depends. Would this be good for me? It depends. Do you like it? Can it fit into your day? So I suppose it's definitely something that I do see. I see a lot of it. Marketing and I suppose external influences take a huge toll on people's minds, and some of them are so good at marketing it that it can be difficult to argue sometimes. They cherry pick research, cherry pick little certain data points that might be from a study that was funded by the company who's trying to push the product, and it's just, I suppose, to answer your question, yes, it is something I do see quite a lot of.
It can be very hard though. Like, it's what people are influenced by and everything. That if you've like this series of studies, 5 meta-analyses on whatever it is you're talking about, that pulled in 25 different actual studies and 14,000 participants and found that no, this is not detrimental to health, but Shane O'Rourke will come on then with his 14,000 followers on Instagram and a six-pack and say this is bad for you. Like, that's going to influence way more people, because it's just easier to see one little tagline, or Shane does a nice, black and white photo with a smile and a grin and the ping in his teeth and the quote there beside. So that looks great. Like, people,
Classic thing.
people are going, people are going to take that in and not like dig into the conclusion section of like some journal you have to pay €45 just to see the paper for anyway. Like,
Yeah, but I suppose it's something I suppose it's something that I've learned as well over the last while is to not take for granted. I mean, we've done undergraduate courses and a master's course as well, and sure you're in the middle of your doctorate at the moment. So, um, knowing how to interpret research isn't a common ability. You know what I mean? So, you kind of have to realize that sometimes too, that people, you kind of take it for granted just because you know how to do it, or you have an idea of how to do it at least, that other people do, but it's just not to be the case. Like, I mean, a lot of people didn't even, yeah, so like a lot of people don't go to college, do courses in college, you don't even, they wouldn't be research courses. So like knowing, I suppose that's our job in a nutshell. Essentially, I suppose is us to interpret the research, stay up to date with the most current research, I suppose, and translate it back to our athletes and clients, I suppose. But I think that the influencers and the marketing is just an obstacle and a barricade that kind of can be difficult to overcome sometimes, I suppose.
yeah, we could go on like we do a whole other episode on like how to interpret research and stuff like that, and even see like I follow a couple of I follow a couple of accounts on Twitter that like one of them is just called just says in mice. So I'll just retweet any study that like with a bold headline to say drinking this much water per day doubles your life expectancy, and then the comments are it's done in mice. Like you can't like actually use this. Unless Shane or Damien want to ask anything else, we'll probably wrap up there and let John plug Target Nutrition there and any of his sponsors there in the background or any of the work he's doing in West Kerry Fitness.
No, unfortunately, lads, things haven't taken off quite like that just yet. No sponsors as of yet. But yeah, if anyone wants to check me out, I suppose for any, I suppose, handy recipes, the odd infographic, or even some coaching online to check out Target Nutrition. Evidence based, I suppose, registered, qualified, the whole lot. So yeah, check out the Instagram Target Nutrition or my website. Yeah, and thanks again for having me on, lads. First guest, something that can never be taken away from me.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. Thanks for coming on. We probably should have got you to throw that up at the start and do like Joe Rogan, how he front loads all his ads, so people have to hear him at the start and not think
yeah. Everything's the best thing ever.
yeah, yeah. Oh, here, like I said, another full episode on debunking Joe Rogan myths. Damien, anything you want to hop in with there? You just had to hop away for a second, or are we okay to wrap up?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. I thought that was fantastic. There's some great points there throughout. So no, that was brilliant.